A very warm welcome to you, and thank you so much for joining our Homeopathy 24/7 podcast. We are going to be speaking to an array of international guests who will share their knowledge and experiences of homeopathy with you. We will discuss all types of subjects such as remedies, symptoms, and stories of health. No matter where you are with your homeopathic journey, we aim to inspire you on your quest to natural health and living. The podcast is brought to you by Greensmith, the founder of Homeopathy 24/7, which is a global platform connecting you with a homeopath wherever you are in the world, 24 hours a day. So let's get started with today's chat. Please welcome Mary Greensmith.
Let's talk about using homeopathy for your animals. In fact, this is how I first found homeopathy. When I was very young, 21, I actually moved up to North Scotland, right up in the hills, to be self-sufficient. We bought a little farm, and we had 25 acres, and we had a few cows and sheep and goats. We had pigs. We had chickens. I took a couple of horses up as well. But the first thing that I realised, obviously, was getting the vet out for any little thing was very, very expensive. And we had a self-sufficiency book which showed us how to, rear pigs. And I'd done agriculture at college, so thought I was great at shearing sheep and things like that. But there were quite a few things I wasn't so good at. In actual fact, it turned out I wasn't very good at shearing sheep either. But that's another story. But what happened was, first winter, we had 4 cows, and they all went in the barn, and they got ringworm. And the ringworm, was big white patches. And it cost, back then in the late 80s, over £100 to have the vet out to give us something for the ringworm for the cows, which I don't know why they needed to come out. Ringworm's been going on for years and years. But anyway, it cost a lot of money. And the next year, I had 20 cows, and I thought, this isn't going to work. So in the self-sufficiency book that I had, it said about homeopathy, and it said about Ainsworth, and it said, they had a little book. So I rang Ainsworth up, and they sent me a little vial. And they said, just put a few drops in the water butt. And I said, yeah, but do you know what? My water butt is a huge, huge tank, absolutely huge. Kids could drown in this tank. It was so big, and that would never work. So anyway, of course, I added a few more drops because I thought, yeah, they don't really know. Anyway, the difference was that within a week, these white patches just peeled off, and hair began to grow. Now, the previous year, when we'd had the vet out, it had gone a little bit dry, but it certainly hadn't disappeared. And certainly by the time the cows went out again in the spring, they still had the ringworm. So the difference, obviously the remedy cost me £4 to treat the whole herd. So very, very different than using what the vets were offering. But also the results were huge in comparison. They were so much better. You could physically see it working. It was so amazing. So obviously from then, I then bought lots of different things for the animals, for lambing and the different things that we were doing. But unfortunately, it was years and years until I realised I could use homeopathy for humans as well. So the family, continued to suffer. But my animals did really, really well on homeopathy. So I am a really, really strong believer in homeopathy for your animals because, it's so much less stressful for a start than going to the vet or having the vet out to you. And there are so many more instances that you can use homeopathy than you can use a vet. It's no good taking the dog to the vets for something, for fireworks. They just haven't got anything there. And the answer is usually they'll need this medication forever, which of course homeopathy doesn't do that. Homeopathy is about changing the status of how the body works. And this was very much indicated when I had a pointer dog and she started getting epileptic fits when my husband went away. And she'd hear him on the phone and she would have a seizure. And of course, if you take her to the vet and he said, well, we can't prove it's a epileptic fit. What we can do is give tests to check it isn't lots of other things. And then we'll give you this medication and she'll have to continue taking that forever. So I had just started my homeopathic training then. So I thought, no, we must have a remedy for this. I don't really need her taking medicine forever to stop something that actually is obviously just an emotional trauma. And so I researched and I gave her a remedy and she never had another seizure again. So, just understanding what is happening, homeopathy gives us so much better choice in medicines. Usually, vets and doctors, in fact, don't have an awful lot of ammunition for the different things that are happening. But for homeopathy, we've got lots and lots of different ways to find the right remedy. But the first thing, obviously, that you're going to be considering is that you can't, first of all, we don't know if they've got a headache. We don't know if they've got pain. We can see colic, obviously. We can see irritation and we can feel if there's difference when there's something off with our animals. The first thing, obviously, to note is the coat and how their coat is sitting. Often a very, very important indication that something is wrong way before something else happens. It's really important, obviously, to take all of that background information, whether you're here or away, whether you're something's out of routine, because emotional trauma happens very, very much with our animals. And we can't ask the questions. We can only take the symptoms on our observations. So our observations are very, very important. So this means that we actually are asking ourselves the questions and then we get the right responses and we get we're led down the track to find the right remedy. So the questions we should be asking ourselves, obviously, what is different? What has happened in the few days leading up to this? And what symptoms are your animals displaying? So, for instance, eating grass, the dog's eating grass. If this is a normal occurrence, then we know that we perhaps have a long-term, a chronic digestion issue. But if it's suddenly happening, then it might be an acute digestion issue. Either way, there are remedies that we can be prescribing to help rebalance the gut. And of course, the gut is associated with all sorts of issues, physical and emotional. So we always need to ask the emotional questions. What has been happening and what is different right now? What happened yesterday? What happened the day before? And we go through this so that we can eliminate some of the different causes. Now, this happened recently with my dog. Lily, she gets very upset when we go away and leave her, which we haven't done very often, I might add, but now we're living in a house and we have the opportunity to go occasionally away. I have had my daughter come here. She knows very well. It's been in the same house. Everything's the same. But each time we've gone away, she has become very ill. So she has needed a remedy. And it's taken me a few days when I get back to work out which remedy it is. And it wasn't until I realized, when did this last happen? Oh, it was last time we were away that I realized actually she needed a huge dose of pulsatilla. And so now I will give her the pulsatilla before we leave and she can have it every day in our absence. I am still kind of nervous to leave her alone because I know that she does suffer. So she is getting more anxious in her old age. But that said, we've just had bonfire night recently, and bonfire night in the UK is when everybody has fireworks, and usually it's very upsetting for Lily. And this year, she didn't even notice. There were bangs going on all over the place. And I think actually, because of course, in years previously, we've been on a boat and the fireworks are landing around us and there isn't so much sound insulation, but in a house, she actually thought it was absolutely fine. So she's okay with that. So it's getting to know your dog or your animal, your cat or your horse, and what is different. So anything that you think is different, you need to write in your book. And I would very much recommend having a notebook for your animals, because this is how you don't remember everything. You think you'll remember which remedy you gave last time, but you won't. And so it's really important to write it down. Now, let's talk a little bit about actually giving the remedy, because it is so easy to put a remedy into the water, whether it's a pilule or a drop. Just put one into the water, and it doesn't really matter if the other animals drink it, because they'll only pick up on the remedy if they need it. But this means that you don't need to continually giving it. There might be acute stages where they have it every day for a week, but you don't need to give it forever. After a week, stop for a few days and see what happens, and then repeat if you need to. If you know something's going to upset your dog, give a remedy beforehand. Getting into the car, if your dog doesn't like traveling, give them arginate or something before they get into the car and when you arrive as well, because if it makes them feel better when they arrive, they'll associate a good time with actually being in the car. So there are lots of different things that you can be doing. My dog just now takes it out of my hand, the remedy. She said, oh yes, I like a bit of this. It makes me feel good. But if not, just slip a pilule in the side of the mouth, whether it's a horse or a dog or a cat, in between the teeth, because all they need to do is have it in the mouth for a small amount of time. If it's a horse, sometimes you could just put a pilule in a syringe of water, shake it around a bit so the water has got the remedy in it, and just syringe a bit of the water into the mouth. That might be easier for your cat as well. They can be sometimes very awkward. But the main thing is get to know your animals and use your observations of everything that might happen. Let me tell you another little story of Lily, obviously living on a boat for a few years. We had a horrible incident when we were on an island miles and miles from anywhere. And she, unfortunately, didn't realise that there were goats on the island, and she spotted one and ran off after the goat. And the goats are very swift and clever on the cliffs. She wasn't so swift and clever, and she ended up falling into the water off the cliff. It wasn't too big a drop, but what was really horrid was that then she landed in the water, and then she climbed up the rocks to get and sit on the rocks, and it was horrid coral, and it cut her fetlocks effectively, and it was really quite horrid. But unfortunately, we were miles. I mean, it would have taken us probably 2 days to get to an island where there might be a vet. So we really had to use everything that we had on the boat to heal her. And of course, that means cleaning wounds, dressing, bandaging. We didn't have stitches at that stage. We did get stitches afterwards, because we thought we definitely need this if we have an accident. But with homeopathy, she had both her legs bandaged, and with homeopathy, it actually cleared up really, really quickly. I mean, within a week, there was never any infection. It was just amazing. I mean, obviously, it helps being in salt water, clean salt water. But I am so grateful that I had a full kit on board, so that we would be giving calendula, obviously, to clean. Calendula is really good for open wounds. Then something to stop the infection. So obviously, I have now made up an infection mix, but we use things like gunpowder and hepasulf. Also, pyrogen we use if there is signs of infection, if there's anything smelly at all in a wound, then that's a really good remedy. But we've got a whole host of notes for you to take on first aid kits. And when you're in this situation of an accident, don't forget to give yourself a remedy as well for shock. And of course, the dog a remedy for shock, because it was a huge shock for her to have this. She's a bit of a wimp anyway. But, remember the emotional sides of a physical ailment. We will be, if we're affected, then they're affected. So take note of your emotions and prescribe that to your dog as well, because if you're feeling it, then they're feeling it. That's another thing actually worth mentioning at this point, is that quite often our animals need the same remedies that we need, or vice versa. If you're finding that your dog is needing a certain remedy, then think, do I actually need this remedy as well? And when we're prescribing, we quite often see that characters take after owners. If we've got an anxious owner, we've probably got an anxious dog. That's not really the case in my, I'm not very anxious as a person at all. I'm quite sort of laid back, but my dog is quite anxious. But that's her breed. Now, knowing the breed, you know a lot about the animal as well. So obviously that's easy to explain with horses. We know that a thoroughbred and an Arab is going to be much more on the arsenicum end of the scale than a Shire horse or a Welsh Section D pony. I don't know if you have the same sort of horses where you are, but knowing their characters, knowing their anxiety levels, knowing what sort of breed they are and how they react will very often help you in finding a useful remedy. So Labradors obviously are quite slow animals, gentle, family orientated, very carby in their personality. And of course, Nux vomica is going to be a really useful remedy for a Labrador, because they are known to like eating and stealing food if they get the opportunity. If you've got a dog that's eating inappropriately, Nux vomica also might be useful. So you have, problem dogs that perhaps only eat certain things or are affected by things. Dogs that are eating, things outside that they shouldn't be eating as well, that affects them. Then there are certain remedies for that. In actual fact, carb has eating inappropriate foods. So for people, that's chalk and sucking on stones and things, but that actually might be really relevant for your animals as well. So what we're doing when we're looking in the repertory is we're looking at the human elements of it. There are a lot that we can't use because we don't know if they've got a headache or not, but there are a lot that we can use. So obviously, how they're lying in their bed might be different than usual. How they are, if they're stood up a lot more, and usually they'd be lying down relaxing, but now they don't want to lie down, we can use that as a symptom. But we're translating it into the repertory in human terms. So we have to be quite good at being changing the words to fit what we're actually seeing. So what have we got so far then? We've got taken to mind the breed and their influences coming from the breed, the things that we already know about the breed, whether it's an ADHD dog. I've got a Hungarian Vizsla and she is definitely ADHD. So whether it's high energy or low energy, you can tell that just from the breed. And then you're taking individual personalities. What is different? What is different today? How do they usually react with people? How sociable are they? If somebody strange comes into the house, how do they react? And what is different? We need to know whether they're shy. We need to know how high their confidence levels is, and we need to know how high their energy levels are in order to find the right remedy. And we're going to take all of this information and put it together to find the remedy that they need right now. So obviously, if they have got something going on, if they are vomiting, for instance, that symptom definitely needs to be in the remedy that we're prescribing. But in order to differentiate between the 5 or 6 different vomiting remedies, we're going to be looking at their overall character. We're going to be looking at their energy levels. We're going to look at how they react emotionally to different things around them. We also would be looking for other symptoms that might be occurring at the same time. So if they're turning around and looking at their abdomen area at this time, we might assume that they have got pain. If they're rubbing their bottoms along the floor, we might assume they have got parasites. So this information that we need to know at the time, because this will help us choose the right remedy. Now, obviously, I find with animals that there are certain other things that can really help as well. Essential oils and sprays, especially with itching and things like that. So to approach the symptoms in any which way that you can. I feel quite lucky actually having lived on a boat with animals, because obviously the salt water was so healing for so many things. And I find a lot of things occur when you haven't got access to beautiful, clear, crystal clear salt water. But it obviously makes me think that salt water is a really good healing thing that's not going to hurt. For any bathing and cleaning of wounds and cleaning of eyes and everything else for your animals. So I hope this will help you understand how you can start using homeopathy in your family, with your pets, with your goats, with your sheep. There are so many different applications, and there are a few really good books as well that you need to have. We've got a course, Homeopathy for Dog Owners, and this goes through all of the different aspects that you should be looking at for your prescribing methods. We're starting to put together things for the cats, but remember that the application is the same, really. The symptoms are going to be very similar, and what you're seeing will be similar. The main thing is, because you know your animals, you can get to know the remedies that are going to be most useful for them. But we're going to use exactly the same method as we use to find remedies for you or your children. And we're going to use that method to find them for the dogs, cats, horses, goats, elephants, guinea pigs, everything we can. But the only difference is we've only got a much smaller amount of information, because we can't ask them questions. But we can ask them, we can feel the energy, and we can feel the difference, and we can understand the history that's gone on beforehand, and we can from there make some really good guesses as to how they might be feeling. But remember, how you are feeling often indicates how they are feeling, so bear that in mind. I hope that was useful today to find out a little bit more about using homeopathy with your animals. Next week, we are going to talk to Heather Smith about homeopathy for Lyme. So if you know of anybody who has suffered or is suffering from Lyme disease, then this chapter next week might be really, really useful. It also obviously covers a lot of information about people who are really suffering with long-term ill health. So I look forward to seeing you all there, and hopefully you can pick up some really useful tips to help feel much more confident about your health in the future. Look forward to seeing you there. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode and look forward to listening to our next one. Please don't forget to follow our podcast on your chosen channel, and please do leave us a review so we can continue to share homeopathy with as many people as possible. If you do have any questions, please do reach out to us on any of our social platforms mentioned in the show notes. We at Homeopathy 24/7 hope to empower you on your natural health journey.